Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cult Fiction. This is our Black Friday show, the day after Thanksgiving. Thank you for joining us. We got our finger on the pulse, what's popping in pop culture. We kind of focus a lot on, well, mainly guy stuff, comics and action movies and things of that nature. If you checked out last week, it's going to be very similar to that, and we're still getting our feet wet, and we're going to figure out how to navigate this damn boat here, this how to control this show pony, so to speak. Um, our topics this week, we're going to start off with, Loki just ended with season two. We're going to touch on that. We also have the Reacher uh, season two trailer popped off. We're going to get into that as well as the Mount and our over under, which we brought to you last week. Starting off with Loki and the big finale and season two, which just ended a couple of weeks ago. We'll jump into that right now. Eric, you want to take us off with that one?
Uh, you know, I really enjoyed it, but I could totally understand why some people didn't. If that makes sense. First off, I'm not a big uh time travel guy, so it's kind of weird that I even like this, but I did. Maybe I have an affinity for the character. Um, I definitely loved Short Round being in it. Like he really, he he really made it enjoyable for me. I don't
He
know.
stole the show, dude.
He was so good. He was so good. Like, yeah, it almost bugs me that he can't be in more stuff. It's like Michael Pena in Ant-Man, which, by the way, he's not in Ant-Man 3, and somebody should be fired for that. Like, I don't know who decided we needed more Michelle Pfeiffer and less Michael Pena, but that person should be fired.
I like the whole
Fired.
internet movement to get Michael Pena to recap all of the MCU before Endgame came out. That never happened.
Absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. So
No, if you haven't watched Loki yet, Short Round, of course, from the Indiana Jones movies is OB or Oberilus. Is am I saying that right?
I'm terrible with names.
Is it?
OB, I'm good with OB.
I know it's OB, but is it? It's
Yeah,
whatever. Oberilus. I'm probably saying it wrong, but whatever. He's a great new character, and he definitely steals the season.
I think
Which
he
is,
does.
I think that's something to be said though, because overall, I think it was a pretty damn good season all around from all the characters that were involved. Alex, what did you think about it?
I was kind of hot and cold on it. There was a lot of stuff I liked and a lot of stuff that didn't really like. I thought that it didn't really hook me until about the end of episode 4, I think it was, which I don't know if we're going to talk about spoilers or what, but I really liked Jonathan Majors. And every time because he was in last season and he's playing a totally different character, a totally different version of himself, but he's really, really he's like a chameleon, and he's like adopting these new characters and new mannerisms and everything. And so when he came into it, it kind of piqued my interest up a little bit. And I kind of agree with Eric about time travel stuff. I usually don't have a sensitivity to it, but I did in this season of Loki for some reason. It's like it ended, and I'm kind of like, I don't know if I could explain to anyone exactly what happened, and
Right,
when everything was
right.
over. Like if somebody said, "What happened in Loki season 2?" But yeah, Short Round is in it. That's what I got.
Yeah, yeah.
Is they had Short Round, and like yeah, I agree with you. He kind of steals the show, and I don't recall ever seeing him in anything else in the last I don't know 30 years since Temple of Doom.
And
But
then of course the
yeah,
everything everywhere
all
all
at
at
Yeah,
once.
once.
everything everywhere all at once, which I thought was a great
yeah,
flick,
still
and he was
watching
really good
that
in
one.
that too.
So ultimately, I kind of like where it ended up, Loki season 2, and how it ended. But how it got there, I don't really have any idea. And so like I said, about until about season episode 4, I was kind of like, all right. But once the end of episode 4 dropped, I kind of binge watched the last two. So, like I said, kind of hot and cold on it. But it doesn't really look like there's going to be a season 3 based on how it ended. But I would still watch it if there was one.
I
Right.
like that it seemed to kind of, in my opinion, watching it, kind of kept you guessing for the first four episodes. I really didn't understand what was happening or what direction it was going until it kind of carved out its own path. And I actually found that enjoyable. It kept me looking forward to week after week to see what was going to develop in the upcoming episodes. What about you, Jubal?
So I I didn't like it. And let me lay out, real quick. Of course, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name. Is Keu Kwan, the guy who played OB,
Right.
did a fantastic job. Majors, I thought he certainly had more screen time. He's got chops. I don't understand why he had a stutter. I don't know why they put that in. It sounded forced and just annoying. And I also am not sure why they said it in the 19th century. It seemed like a weird design choice. But I think the biggest problem that I had with this was the first season of Loki I dug. I thought it was great. But it was because there was this power structure that you were sort of unraveling as the season went on, right? The Time Bureau was this massive, super powerful organization that kind of existed at the top of the MC universe, and so you had to navigate your way through this entirely new hierarchy and figure out why it was that the Time Bureau was so powerful. And there was layer after layer that you went through. This season felt like just retreading. It didn't really feel like they introduced new layers or anything like that. There was a MacGuffin that they were chasing for most of the season, the Loom, which was just, meaningless in the end. And then again, spoiler alert, Loki spends centuries learning physics, right? For ultimately for no purpose at all. It just seemed like there was a lot of interesting ideas that didn't really pan out. They didn't really come to fruition. And it ended up in this sort of nebulous area where, okay, so he's the time god now. He's it didn't make it clear what he had actually done. That somehow he's sacrificing himself, and his character has this redemption arc in this season where he comes to understand that he cares about people and that's okay, that's the way you're supposed to be. But his redemption felt stunted because you didn't really understand what he was doing or what he was giving up. Owen Wilson is always great. I'm super glad that he was in it. He was the high point for me in a lot of places. But I wish they had spent a little bit more time really digging into what they were trying to say with that ending, because it felt flat. So
Right.
that's my 2 cents.
I kind of feel what you're saying there. Like it was enjoyable from just like a watching, like, whatever. It was MCU, it was heroes, it was a good time. It was fun to watch. But like when you really start breaking it down, and I will say this about Jonathan Majors before I get too deep into this, I wasn't really sold on him. I didn't know much about him when he showed up as Kang in the first season or in Ant-Man Quantumania. I was like, okay. I will say in Creed, was it Creed 3?
Yeah.
He absolutely blew me away, dude. He
Yeah.
blew me away in that movie. And then when he showed back up in season 2, like I was like, he's a phenomenal actor, man. And he really sold Kang for me in this one. And I get what you're saying about the stutter. It was kind of a way to differentiate his character. I feel you there.
The stutter felt like it was just this ad hoc thing that they kind of added on. But the thing about Kang in the first season, he was an excellent villain in the first season. He was this great villain because he was almost silly. He was almost kind of slapstick. But then there was something sinister about him too, because he had he had this understanding. He knew what was going to happen. He knew what they were going to do. He had all the answers. And there was this idea that, look, I've already been through this millions of times. I know how it has to go. And, there was this finality to his character sitting there in the house at the end of time. In this season, I felt like it was a downgrade. Like he was kind of this, he was a genius, but he was also kind of dopey, kind of, it felt like his character was not anywhere near as cool as the first Kang in the first season. So, but again, just my 2 cents, but I would still say that I enjoyed it because the universe is interesting and the characters are cool. I'm not going to say that it was an absolute thumbs down, but I would give it like a D+.
I don't think that the stuttering version of Kang was supposed to be the Kang that we saw at the end of the first season, though. I think that obviously there's variants, and that was just one variant of Kang that they were trying to use to replace the first Kang that got killed. And I get what you're saying. It kind of like, why did they choose to focus on this 19th century Chicago World's Fair version of the variant as opposed to a different one? I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. But the scene with Loki and Kang at the end when they're going through the motions over and over and over again, and Loki reveals his hand. Like that whole scene, the way it played out was just, I thought it was wonderful between
Do you think
Majors.
part of the reason that Kang wanted the stuttering one is because at the end of the day, he was very smart, but he was also a con man. And maybe he wasn't as smart as some of the other Kangs. And he would have figured out the thing about the loom much faster, which would have negated Loki doing everything that he did, which would have led him to, you know, talking to He Who Remains at the end again. Does that make sense?
It makes
So if
sense. I
they-
mean, it's possible, but you know, what if, what
Because
it
it was
could,
all
what it could have,
planned,
should
but
have, you know, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. It was all
it's-
planned by he Who Remains.
right.
So.
I just think it could have been better in the way that it was delivered.
So basically, like, spoiler alert, you know, Loki's essentially over at this point. I don't see how we bring Loki back. But he ends, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I'm getting it, he ends up as God of Stories. Is that right, Eric?
Right. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's certainly the consensus online, and I think that you could bring him back. You know, some people have speculated that because he's touching all of the timelines, that he can make an incarnation of himself in any timeline. So that could be an easy way explained in one line of dialogue that he shows back up. I think it gives them the opportunity to, if he doesn't sign, you see this a lot with shows at the end of a season where it's just like, okay, oh, this person is in the hospital at the end of this, you know, and really what it is if he signs, he lives,
Right.
and
right.
if he doesn't sign, he gets to die off screen in the hospital, right? And I think that that's what's going on maybe with Loki is, you know, he gets this nice send off, and great. If he doesn't want to do it anymore, that's what he does. And if he does want to do it anymore, you fix it with a line of dialogue that says he can create an avatar of himself in any timeline that he wants, and you just go from there. So
Let me ask you this, on a completely different vein of the same TV show. There, to me, it seemed like the TVA and all of the pruning and the branches of the timeline and everything was very centric, focused on Earth. Which, like, if we go back to Marvel, What If, uh, you know, the Watcher sees everything. He sees all dimensions and everything that's going on. Like, they pretty much explained that with the What If with Ultron getting the stones. Now, with the TVA being so focused on Earth and the branches being focused on Earth, and when Docs goes through with her plan to prune everything except for the central timeline, are we just led to believe that they're just pruning all the timelines of Earth, or is that supposed to be all the timelines of everything? Because that's where I kind of got lost, because they seem so ethnocentric on Earth, where if they're just killing off the Earth timelines, then it doesn't seem as devastating. But they're killing off all the timelines, then they're killing more people, so to speak, than Thanos did. Like, and I feel like that was just completely glossed over.
that's an interesting thought process, because it makes you wonder why the TVA doesn't have, you know, green chicks like Gamora, or, you know, pink people like the chick that Star-Lord was banging at the beginning of
Right.
Guardians of the Galaxy, or, you know, squid people or something. It's just all humans. Yeah, that's an interesting question.
I don't know how to explain it. You have any thoughts on that, Alex?
It seemed like in this season they kind of touched upon the idea that the more realities they had, it just couldn't sustain itself, and everybody would eventually die. You know, that's what the whole point of pruning was the idea that once it just goes out of control, everything collapses in on itself. I guess. Yeah, I'd like. Yeah, it's not like they were really explicit about it, but that's just sort of the vibe that I got. That it was just kind of like you have to prune everything, or everything dies for some reason.
Right.
Because, you know, writing.
Seemed pretty ad hoc to me. You know, there wasn't again, I go back to my main complaint with the ending, which is that you just didn't provide a good explanation. You know, tell me why these things are happening, you know. That's something that I thought they did really well in the first season, but they just didn't in this season.
Yeah, and all the different
Loki was
variants too that they had of Loki.
so he fixed time, I guess. Well, spoiler, I don't know, with his green energy fixed all the timelines because, I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything. Why
Exactly.
anything happened. I could just tell you where it ended up.
Well, I like the videos that we've
That's
seen
kind of
online
part
of the videos we've seen online of the poetic send off that they gave to Loki's character with his the juxtaposition of when we first got introduced to him versus when he finally ended the series with Loki season 2. A lot of the similar dialogue, a lot of the similar foreshadowing from Dark World and the first Thor movie and stuff like that. Like all in all, script wise, it was for Loki specifically. The dialogue was a pretty decent send off, and I don't think we're going to see him again. But he was one of those villains that stuck around in the MCU longer than virtually any other villain stuck around in the MCU. And like we talked about, and leading into this next thing, he had a good redemption arc, and you kind of came to love him as the character that he was, and he became a lot of people's favorite in the MCU as well. And so, moving on from that, kind of gives us our theme for the Mount, which is Eric's brainchild. So, Eric, why don't you go ahead and introduce us to this?
Okay, so for this week, what we decided to do was villains who had, somewhat redeemed themselves in some regard, had done something, had kind of that arc, maybe not complete hero, maybe whatever, but they've done something to help, right their karma going into the afterlife.
And the Mount, of course, is Mount Rushmore of these
Right.
right? So it would be our top 4 characters with a redemption arc.
Yeah.
And Loki would be a prime example of that. And so why don't you go ahead and kick us off with your 4?
Okay, so my 4, since, being a father of 2, I'm going to go with a couple of kids' movies first. Okay? First one, Gru. From Despicable Me. Right? His whole thing was about being a villain. Being despicable. Right? And these 3 little girls come into his life, and he turns it all around and becomes I don't know, I just thought it grew talk about doing a complete 180, like going from a villain who just loves being a villain to Father of the Year candidate. So that's my first one. Second one, again from a kids movie, Megamind. You guys remember Megamind?
Yeah,
That was a good one.
Yeah,
I really liked Megamind.
I did like Megamind, dude.
wasn't Brad Pitt a voice in that one?
Yes, he was the guy who he was the superhero who faked his death and everything.
That's right.
And was really kind of the precipice for Megamind having to, they didn't have a hero anymore. So he obviously went from a person who reveled in his villainy, from even the time that he was a child, to becoming the hero. So my next one, you were talking about Jonathan Majors in Creed 3. I'm going to go with Apollo Creed. Right? Rocky, he was the villain. He was the bad guy. By Rocky 3, he was Rocky's best friend. And by Rocky 4, you were like just devastated when Ivan Drago killed him. Spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, it's been out since 1985. So it's gonna, get on the bus. But yeah, dude, Apollo Creed went from like the guy who was, he brash and cocky, and thought Rocky was just going to be a chump that he could just beat up on the 4th of July type of thing, and then became Rocky's best friend. So Apollo Creed. And then my last one is going to be Steve Harrington. Steve Harrington. Because I rewatched season 1 recently, and he was kind of a douche in the beginning. And it's hard to even think about it because like 3 seasons later, you're like, Steve, he's the man. Total douche in the first several episodes, complete douche.
For
And
those of you
now,
playing along at home, Eric's talking about Stranger Things.
oh yeah. Did I miss it? Did I mention that? Yeah, Stranger Things. Yeah, dude. I watched season 1 of Stranger Things and was like, man, I forgot what an asshole this guy was. But now he's great. Now we can't imagine the gang not with him. So
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great pick.
Became a
Yeah.
major player. Jubal, who are your top 4?
Okay. So I got my first one is HAL 9000. So the thing is, a lot of people have seen 2001. Not nearly as many people have seen 2010. But I thought HAL 9000's redemption arc was really fantastic. He's this iconic villain, the first terrifying AI that ever existed, right? But spoiler alert, he broke down, he malfunctioned because he was lied to. But then in the second movie, they tell him the truth, and he's able to redeem himself by sacrificing himself to save the astronauts in that movie. I thought it was a really cool redemption arc for him. My second is Jules Winfield. If you remember, in Pulp Fiction, Jules Winfield basically was trying to get out of the life that he was in, trying to get out of this cycle of violence that he was trapped in. And I thought he was obviously a fascinating character, and maybe not a hero, but certainly that was a heroic act. Third for me is going to be, I don't know the character's name, or if the character even had a name, but it was Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. His last act before he died was to save the life of Harrison Ford. This guy that just minutes earlier he was trying to kill, right? It was
spoiler alert.
Right. So he, I mean, if you haven't seen Blade Runner, you're watching the wrong podcast, I would say. But he, that was pretty darn redeeming. The third, I'm sorry, the fourth, the last one is I would say the Malfoy family from Harry Potter. It was not just Dad Malfoy, right? Who as the stuff started to happen, as things started to go bad, his only concern was saving his family. And I thought that was pretty cool, even though he was a jerk in all the other movies, right? But it was also the mom, in the sense that she was the one who bent down and realized that Harry Potter was still alive. And in that moment, she could have betrayed him, right? She could have said to Voldemort that he was still alive, but she sided with him. And then also, the son, Malfoy Jr., at the end of the movie, you see he's one of the teachers at Hogwarts. So that's my 4.
Nice.
I like it. Alex, this was kind of a brainchild between you and Eric. So who are your top 4?
So I'll start the first with the obvious one, which is Darth Vader. Obviously he had the redemptive arc there, and it's one thing that's kind of interesting about Vader's arc now is that the more mythology and the more stories that have come out over the last 40, 50 years since the first movie or the first trilogy, it is kind of harder and harder to accept his redemption arc, because the more stories that come out, the more people he's killing. In the first 3 movies, he choked a dude, he yelled at people and stuff, but he didn't really do anything so grotesquely evil. And then by now, 2024, he's slaughtered rooms full of children, and he's just basically a walking murder factory. But still, at the end, he picked up the Emperor and threw him down the tower. So he's good again. He goes to heaven. All right, even I can admit that,
Spoiler
it's a little
alert.
hard to accept one. But still, the original trilogy, that's a great redemption, and it's really effective. So the other one that I had was the Terminator, Model T-101. You have in the first Terminator, obviously, he's just a killing machine. And in Terminator 2, he's sent back. It's not the same one, but it might as well be. And the idea is that it's sort of a redemption for the machine that tried to kill Sarah Connor in the first one. And I still, in the second movie, it always gives me chills when he comes out of the elevator in the asylum and she sees him and runs away. And then he walks up to her and he holds out his hand and just says, "Come with me if you want to live." Because that was the same two words that Kyle said to her. And it's always like a really, really great moment in that series. And it really solidifies his point in the story at that point.
Right.
Here, here.
To this day, probably the only sequel that's better than the original.
Right.
Yeah. I have Professor Snape, who,
yeah.
As you go by the movies or the books, everybody hated him for basically 6 books or 6 movies. And then it comes out by the end of the series, you realize that, he was a secret agent for Dumbledore, through the end of the first Voldemort attack and everything. And I liked his redemption arc because at the end of the day, despite the fact that he's doing something good, there's still like a dark side to him. He still really doesn't like Harry Potter, and he doesn't because of who his father was and everything. But he still wants to do the right thing, even though he really, really, I think, loathes this child. And so that was kind of cool. But for me, I think one of the maybe the most interesting arc as far as a villain who just sort of redeems himself is Game of Thrones. And regardless of what you think of the last season, I think Theon Greyjoy's arc.
He almost made mine. Yeah.
Yeah. And was a fascinating arc because you spend so much time hating him, and then you feel a lot of pity for him, and then you start to actually root for him in a sense. And he ends the story, spoiler again. And if you haven't seen a show, like indie show called Game of Thrones, a few people saw it. Yeah, so he goes out in a very, very heroic fashion, and it's really interesting how you can go from just biasing somebody and loathing them to kind of being like, okay, well, now I kind of feel bad for the guy, and then you're like, okay, you're rooting for him, you can do this, you can get there, throughout the whole thing. Yeah, what was that?
I was gonna say, kicker is Bran, who can see everything that you've ever done, and he told him, "You're a good man." And it's like, oh yeah, I mean,
right. So that's really interesting to me how they manage to do that, and it's kind of how they get you to feel all the different ways about one single character. And I think he's probably one of the best examples of how to get somebody to feel so against and hate a character so much to feeling bad for them and feeling pity for them, and then eventually rooting for them. Right. And I thought it was a fascinating process. And no matter what you think of Game of Thrones in the final season, I think his arc overall is one of the best character arcs probably in the history of television.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I mean, in a show that had so many characters too, a lot of those characters were developed really well. I mean, to the point where you almost felt bad for Cersei when she's being walked down the streets and the shame bells are ringing and stuff like that, even though she's just a terrible person in that whole series.
Just a person, and at that point I hated the other guy more.
Shame on you.
but you almost hated everybody else more at that point in time. And then Joffrey, obviously one of the most hated characters ever in TV history. And there was no redemption for him. His only redemption was death. But you're right, Theon Greyjoy really stuck out because he had this hateable, punchable face in the beginning, and then you really were rooting for him in the end, which is what this was supposed to be about. And I didn't do my homework very well, so mine's a terrible Mount Rushmore, because I was going for like villains that turned heroes, and I couldn't think of any. So my first pick was Dominic Toretto from Fast and Furious. Yeah,
I get it. No, I get that though. I get it. Because he was the guy, he was the villain. He was the reason why Paul Walker's character was put on the case, because they were stealing a ton of shit.
Yeah. Well, he was the villain in the original Fast and Furious.
He was the villain. Yeah,
absolutely. But you know, those movies are cheesy and probably don't belong on Mount Rushmore. I just love them. Uh, and I was going down that same path and trying to like think of villains who like turned into good guys. And so I'm taking this one off. I've had some more time to think about it. I'm taking this one off my 4 picks, but is Frank from the Transporter, because he's technically a criminal in the beginning, but then he turns into like
Yeah.
you know, a vigilante type guy. But I'm going to take him off. I want to take Snape from Alex, because I was actually before Alex said it, I was like, you know what, Snape from Harry Potter, probably a solid example. I like that character a lot. And then Snake Bliskin, because he's a
Oh
criminal.
yeah,
He's a
yeah, yeah.
criminal,
Escape
dude.
from New York. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Good call.
escape
Good
from New
call.
York, escape to LA. He's full on criminal, but man, he
Mm.
has that redemption arc, dude. You're rooting for him the entire time. Um, and then what about Gollum?
Hmm.
Huh.
That's I think
I mean, he
I don't
kind
think
he
it's
kind of
quite
comes
that
he kind of comes through in the end.
Kinda.
but
He
he
kind of
doesn't.
comes through in the
He
end.
kind of falls into it literally.
False. Spoiler.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I had the wrong interpretation of this, so my picks are kind of last
No,
minute.
no,
But
it's yeah, that's fine. You know, I will say, now you think about it, Game of Thrones could have had a few of them
Yeah,
because you know
Jamie Lannister for sure.
the Hound,
Yeah, and the
the
Hound.
Hound,
Yep.
yeah,
dude.
solid.
I mean, who didn't hate the Hound halfway through the first season? You know, I mean, and then by the end, you're just like, oh yeah, you know, like,
I gotta say, I'm surprised, Eric, that you didn't pick Yondu.
you know, I will say I did make an attempt to not go like Marvel heavy.
Right. Fair enough.
I was kind of making, because I know a lot of my lists are going to be comic book characters, they're going to be Marvel, they're going to be DC, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of made like a little bit of an attempt to not do that this time, you know.
Yeah, Yondu's a
But
solid choice. I'm going to put him on mine. I'm going to take that from Jubal.
there you go.
It's all yours.
There you go.
My
Nice.
Mount Rushmore is made of clay, so I can remodel it the way that I want it.
Nice.
So speaking of Snake Bliskin, we had another trailer with another badass who it's a really bad segue, but whatever. Jack Reacher season 2 trailer came out, and he's someone he's a vigilante. He's a man after his own ways. And the season 2 is coming out here December 15th, I believe. I'm pretty sure we've all seen season 1, and I think we've all seen the movies as well. What did you think of the new season trailer once it launched? Jubal, we'll start with you.
So I am I'm looking forward to it. It's interesting that the first 2 Lee Child's books I ever read were Killing Floor and Trouble, Bad Luck and Trouble, which is what these 2 seasons are. So that's kind of fascinating. Fascinating coincidence. I've always enjoyed the Jack Reacher character because he uses what criminals tend to use against them, in the sense that he's this huge, intimidating guy, and he has no problem using his strength and intimidation against bad people, right? Against predators who are used to docile victims.
Right.
Right. He can just stand there and look at you. Like in the very first episode of the very first season, he the guy who's, potentially going to abuse the girl that he's with, Jack Reacher just stands there and looks at him. And
Right.
the guy goes through the whole, like, what are you looking at? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll do better, without him even having to say anything. So that's one of the reasons that we like this character so much, is that he has no problem using their tactics against them. And so I'm really looking forward to the second season. It's very clear that they have a bigger budget. You can tell from the trailer. There's a lot more explosions than there were in the entire first season, just in the trailer. So I think it's going to be really good. I think that the guy that they've picked out to play Jack Reacher is perfect, certainly much better than Tom Cruise. So I'm looking forward to it.
Right.
I got to say, I was hoping you're going to bring up Tom Cruise, because with the season 2 trailer coming out, there's been a lot of Tom Cruise clips popping up on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. And while Tom Cruise didn't fit the part of Jack Reacher from, the description from the books, I got to say, man, some of the writing in those movies were just excellent. Like the diner scene where he gets arrested was a great scene, but dude, the bar fight scene, all the dialogue leading up to the actual fight in that bar fight scene. I don't know if it's part two or part one. I think it's part one.
Yeah.
I can't stop laughing when I watch that scene. When he's talking to the girl and basically calls her a hooker without calling her a hooker. And
Yeah.
then she calls her brothers over and this guy says, "Oh, that's my sister." And he asks, if she's a good kisser, and she says she wants to watch the fight because she doesn't mind the sight of blood. And he says, only if it means you're not pregnant. Like, dude, it was just like a
Yeah.
zinger after a
Ouch.
zinger after zinger. And then they go out in the parking lot and he breaks down the whole fight before it even happens. And then he kicks their ass exactly how he said he was going to do it. Like the writing, the dialogue in the Reacher ones with Tom Cruise was great, even though he didn't fit the part. I do like the show a lot better with this big hulking guy they have playing Jack Reacher, and just the trailer that came out, which I know Alex is super pumped about too, when he kicks the car and makes the airbag go off. Like it looks super
Classic.
exciting. I will say the only thing I'm worried about is them bringing in like his whole old platoon, because I almost feel like they're rushing into that because it's only season 2 and it might be too soon to pull that curtain back. But I guess, we got to wait and see exactly how that's going to develop. But Alex, you were super stoked about this. You wanted to touch on it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed the first season. I've read a few of the books, and I'm like you. I kind of rushed to the defense of Tom Cruise a little bit in the Reacher movie, only because at the time it was either Tom Cruise as Reacher or no Reacher at all. You know, and like you said, the writing in the movie I thought was excellent. Christopher McQuarrie, he's a great screenwriter, great director, and the first movie is I think it's quite good and it holds up really well. I get that Tom Cruise is not the physically imposing character that I forget the name of the actor who plays him in this TV series, but that he's perfect for it. And I do think that he adds that sort of physicality that he possesses does add something to him as a character. Sometimes even in the movies, Tom Cruise would say something kind of intimidating, and it doesn't quite hit the same way. Like when he
Right.
says, "But how about the back of an ambulance?" It's just like, okay. But if the guy in the Reacher series says it, okay, you believe him in a way.
Right.
It doesn't hit the same way. And I'm really looking forward to it. I was a little bit disappointed with the ending, not the ending, but so much the climax of the first season, where it just kind of devolved into gunfights, which are not necessarily bad, but I just think the choreography of it was not very good, and especially in the last episode, it was just kind of like going through the motions a little bit. I'm hoping with this season, with a little more time and effort and budget, they can kind of tighten it up. Because I remember the first couple episodes in the first season, all the fighting and the choreography just seemed really, really exciting. And then the last episode or so, the last episode or two, was just kind of, they kind of threw that together. Like they had 2 more weeks, to filming, and they had to complete everything. But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to it. And Reacher has become sort of a little bit of a guilty pleasure, because
Yeah.
here's this guy who just is pretty much unstoppable. He's better than everyone at everything.
Yeah.
And it's a pure fantasy, but one that one that I do enjoy. And it's just if it's like one season of him just stumbling upon bad people doing bad things, randomly, like in the trailer, he just goes to an ATM machine and sees a woman that's being carjacked, which happens to everybody pretty often, obviously. But then he just goes and beats up some criminals. You know what? If it's 10 episodes of that, I'm not going to be bored. So it's going to be hard to disappoint me, but I do hope they kind of aim a little bit higher and reach
Yeah.
reach a bigger target.
Which I think is what they're probably trying to do by bringing in a whole new cast of characters behind Reacher. What about you, Eric? Did anything jump out of that trailer that you're looking forward to in season 2?
I think one of the things I'm looking forward to is one of the things that some people are not looking forward to, which is that the thing about Reacher is it seems like, and I haven't read the books like the other guys, that every season is going to be kind of like a new cast of characters. You might have like 1 or 2 people from his past, but there's a lot of people who are like, they're going to miss the deputy and the detective from the first season, right? And I get that. But I'm also kind of excited to see how that plays out, where it really is a Reacher series. And so it's going to be about him, and he's going to have a new, he's going to have a new detective in almost every season, a new deputy, sheriff in every season, all that kind of thing. And there's a lot of people who are worried about it, but I don't know. I think almost every show has, a situation where almost the entire cast comes to the next season. it'll be kind of interesting to see what the show develops, where you're only getting him, and then like maybe his female partner from the girl he calls in towards the end of the season that helps him out. I think she's in this season because she's part of his old unit and stuff like that. But there's not going to be like a bunch of people going from season to season, and I think that's kind of interesting. I'm looking forward to. I mean, is that about right, Jubal and Alex? Is that what you venture a guess is going to happen?
I think so. I mean, I can't imagine you're going to have a detective from Margrave following him around the world.
Right, exactly. Right.
Fights villains, right? So yeah,
right.
I think recycling the cast is going to be an interesting aspect of it. And at the end of the day, it's cool because it's going to give you an opportunity to see a lot of different actors and actresses, try out their chops and maybe find some new talent. So that's good.
So yeah, it seems kind of weird thing to look forward to. But when I saw people complaining about it online, I'm like, I don't know, this could be a net positive.
I think ultimately it makes sense because, I mean, Reacher, he's kind of nomadic. He's never in the same place at the same time. So like what you're saying makes complete sense. What I meant earlier was like pulling back the curtain on his whole, like, this feels like a later season move that a lot of shows we've seen do, where they're like all of a sudden they bring in the whole unit that the person was training with or whatever.
Right.
Because
and that might happen at the end of the season too. I mean, because it was a trailer for the whole season, right? So it may be that we don't see his unit until 5 or 6 episodes in.
Right.
I guess time's going to tell on that one. And with Reacher coming out December 15th, we also started doing something last week called Over Under, which is one of Alex's things. And so this week we have an Over Under theme with is it badasses, Alex? What's the Over Under theme this week?
Yeah. Basically, pretty simple. It's one overrated thing and one underrated theme, and the theme we're on today is based on segueing off the Reacher trailer into badasses. And so you give one overrated badass and one underrated badass. And for me personally, I have an underrated badass that I don't think anybody's going to recognize him. I think that's one of the reasons he's kind of underrated. His name is Matt Buchanan, right? Nobody recognizes him. He's the guy in the original Terminator that's sleeping in the bed, and Arnold Schwarzenegger comes up and kills him before he kills Sarah Connor's roommate that he thinks is Sarah Connor, right?
Okay.
I was watching the movie like recently, like a week ago, and he wouldn't stop attacking the Terminator no matter what happened. Like the first thing the Terminator does is he picks him up and he throws him through a glass door, and he just gets right up and starts throwing punches at the Terminator. And I'm just kind of like, if a Terminator came and picked me up while I was sleeping and like threw me through a glass door, I accept death. At that point, I'm not. But he's just getting up and he's going at him, and he even goes for a pretty damn good double leg takedown on him. But he's made of titanium, so it doesn't work out that well. But I just thought, wow, I mean, I wish, I would hope that if like a Terminator from the future would like attack me, I would go out that strong, but I probably won't. And I would implore everyone else to go back and watch that scene and realize just how much fight he's attempting to give somebody that completely outmatches him. I think you might be surprised. As far as overrated badass, I have Bill from Kill Bill, because you have basically 2 movies of like leading up to this, and I love the movies. I even like the character, and I'm not I'm not really disappointed with how the movie ended. But as far as a badass goes, he's like just permeating this entire series, and then at the end they show up together and they have a chat, and then he can't even get out of a chair because she kills him, and it's just kind of like and I'm just as far as a badass is built up over like 2 movies at that point, you might kind of expect more. Like I said, I get what Tarantino was doing. He didn't want to give you what you expected. He wanted to go a more cerebral route with it, and it was effective and still a great movie. But as far as you expect a badass out of this guy, and nothing just shows up and she gives him a heart attack, and so that's why he's overrated badass to me.
Those are good picks. Those are good picks.
What do you got on the table, Jubal?
Okay, so for overrated, overrated badass is honestly is Liam Neeson in everything he's done since the first Taken movie.
Oh,
Right? I mean, come on.
I get it. I get it.
Right? Give me a
I get
break. Give me a break with this. I tried to watch one of his more recent ones. It was painful. I couldn't do it. Underrated badass. Alex will know what I'm talking about. Is Rama from The Raid. And if you haven't seen The Raid, this is an important movie. If you like action movies, you should see The Raid. Watch it. It's amazing. And I don't know the actor's name. He's a Korean guy, but he absolutely tears it off in that movie.
I've
Who's
been
next?
seeing clips and musings of the raid a little bit online here and there. So I haven't seen the whole movie, but I've definitely seen some clips that have piqued my interest. So I'm gonna take your word on that and probably have to check that one out.
It's great,
Eric,
dude.
Eric, you're over under today.
Yeah, no, yeah. I got an overrated one. Do you guys remember? Is his name Will Forsythe? Do you guys know what I'm talking
Forsyth,
about?
yeah, Will Forsyth.
And he was in that Seagal movie. Was it Above the Law? Which one was it? Which one was it that he just went on that rampage and he was just killing all these people?
No, it wasn't Above the Law. It was the fourth
wasn't.
one. Out of Bounds. Out of Bounds.
No, it wasn't Out of Bounds. It was before that. It was Marked for Death, Hard to Kill. I forget, but you know which one I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm looking up his movies now.
Okay.
I mean, I know who the actor is.
Yeah, so he spends that whole movie just like killing.
It's Out for Justice. Out for Justice is
Out
the
for
movie that you're
Justice.
thinking of. That's
Yeah.
Oh, you beat me to it. All right.
He goes and he's out there killing people and doing all that kind of stuff. And then Seagal gets to him at the end and just beats the living shit out of him. Though I don't even think he landed a punch. He got thrown all around like a kitchen. I mean, he got beat with a pan. I think he hit him in the face with a pan at one point. It was like this guy had the whole city like, terrorized, and he met Steven Seagal at the end of that movie and just got battered and without landing.
Yeah, he was.
And that's pretty much what happens anytime anyone meets Steven Seagal.
Okay,
honestly.
so this is my underrated. My underrated is Steven Seagal in that first 4 or 5 movies that he did. And I'm talking about Under Siege, Out for Justice, Marked for Death, Hard to Kill, because we forget how good of an action star he was for that finite amount of time. And now he is
a joke.
Yeah, like a caricature of himself.
Oh, 100%.
Just silliness, like to where he needs a stunt double to go up a flight of stairs. You know what I mean? And I don't think that and then again, we're all MMA fans and I think that'll come out later as we go on with this. But one of the things I've always said is, as an MMA fan, it has also hurt my ability to enjoy certain movies. Whether it's like, the Jet Li movie where he just goes, he taps a person and they're like knocked out. And it's like, no, I know what it takes to knock out a human being. I've seen, you see what it looks like when people are in combat with each other and what it takes to knock out a human being. That's not going to knock out anybody. But Steven Seagal, in those first 5 movies, that shit holds up. Like if you wrap a cue ball in like,
dude, I was gonna bring that up. The cue ball and the sock, or the cue ball and the
and
towel.
then hit me in the face with it, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like I'm done. I'm going to sleep. Just if you break my arm and like and then throw me through a plate glass window, I'm done. And so, through all the fighting and MMA that we've seen, those movies hold up. And so I think there's a whole generation of fans now who look at him as a complete joke. And it's like, yeah, no, agreed. But those 5 movies in that little beautiful moment in time. We're pretty.
It was like the pinnacle of Seagal.
What's that?
Oh,
It was like the pinnacle of Seagal. What was it, like
Right,
86
like
to
86 to
92 or something like
91
that?
or something, like
we
whatever
could
that was.
we could easily do a best and worst Seagal moments. Like,
Oh,
True.
jeez.
True.
because
Oh, we could-
the cue
and they
ball
would-
in the towel was probably one of the most impactful like scenes because it sticks with me to this day. It's
And
one
the
of
guy,
those things.
you show the guy spitting out his teeth. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, dude.
And like you
That's
said,
what
if you hit me in the face with a cue ball and a towel, even if I'm not knocked out, I'm pretending I am because I don't want to get
I'm-
back up from that.
Right. Sleep time.
exactly.
Sleep time.
Yeah,
This-
never gonna happen. But there's
Yeah.
also a recent clip of Steven Seagal in some, I don't even know, Z-rated movie where he's
Yeah.
like, where he's holding like an assault rifle, like a person would hold like an AR-15 or whatever. And then when you go to turn a corner, you like, they call it slicing
And
the
he just
pie.
switches his
something
hands,
else.
huh?
He just switches hands. No, you don't do that. You don't just like, oh, I'm turning a corner. I'm going to put the gun in my left hand now. You don't do that. You don't do
Yeah.
that. It's not a real thing. But Seagal did it, and it was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen.
It's so ridiculous. Like, I don't know who is paying him to do these Eastern European action films, but they either really love him or they're just sitting back making fun of him. It's one of the two.
Hmm.
So
Ridiculous.
I think I remember reading something about how because they're released in Europe with tax breaks or something, they're just really, really profitable because they just dish them out so quickly for so little money.
right.
And but you don't have to get a whole lot of people buying the DVDs. But I,
I don't know.
I don't know how much longer it's going to go on. But
My over under for Biggest Badass is for overrated. Hard for me to narrow it down, but I guess if I had to go like real big, and I'm hate me for this all you want, but it's the Night King from Game of Thrones. Like we spent almost 8 full seasons being terrified of this guy and the utter destruction he was going to wreak on all of Westeros and everything else, and then it was like Arya in the library with a candlestick fucking killed him. Like, give me a fucking break, bro. Did you really make us fucking wait a decade for her to fucking jump out from a tree and fucking kill the Night King? Come on.
that's one of the things that really pissed me off about season 8 too, was because I totally thought that she was going to like wear a Nightwalker face and then sneak up
Yeah.
on the Night King like that, because I felt like that was just the culmination of her whole storyline up until that point. We should put on the face of one of the Nightwalkers, get close to the Night King, stab him. I had predicted she would kill the Night King for a long time, but for that reason, not because she would, do like this Michael Jordan jump out of the
Yeah,
I was
Jubal knows, Bueller knows. I don't think that a lot of the season 8 hate holds a ton of water. That one though, there's a bucket full of issues that you can have with that. I can't. That could have been, that one scene could have been done the way Alex mentions, where she's wearing a White Walker face or something as she walks up, and would have done that way. I think honestly, half the hate goes away of season 8.
Right.
Now the other half is
Right.
going to be,
I agree
of
with
course,
that.
because
Yeah.
what happened with Jon Snow and blonde Abraham Lincoln, but because that's what everybody thought she was, right? Everybody thought she was the blonde Abraham Lincoln, when in reality, she was like
Blonde Hitler.
She was blonde Hitler. Like Alex mentioned it before to me, and he was just like, do you know how many times, if you really rewatch it, she has to be talked out of just murdering like large swaths of people? And then I, and of course I watched it and I was like, well, he's 100% right. Like even when she crucified all those people on the thing, on the road to Marine, and then that guy comes and he's just like, my dad was one of the people who was standing up against them. And she was just like, irritated that he would even what like I did something wrong. Did I do something wrong? If somebody needs to feed him to one of my dragons, please. You know, it was just like, Jesus, woman, like what? So everybody's watching this chick and thinking she's, you know, she's silver-haired Abraham Lincoln, and in reality, she's almost as bad as her brother. Almost, not quite. Her brother was a piece of shit, but
Her brother was a whiny bitch.
he was a whiny bitch. But he was like a. That's almost what makes it like. Imagine that whiny bitch with like power. Ugh, gross. You know, but so anyway, on my tangent, half the hate is because of what happened to her, and then half of it, I think, is the Night King. Yeah.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that Bram should have warged into one of the dragons and ate the Night King, and I would have been happier.
Yeah, that would have been cool. That would have been
I hadn't
pretty
even
cool.
thought of that. That would have been dope. That would have been dope too.
No, but we could go on with Game of Thrones forever, I'm sure. But if I had to go underrated, and I just had my answer for this one too, and it completely escaped my mind. It was Viggo Mortensen in History of Violence.
Ooh,
Good
Yeah,
call.
yeah, a lot of people get a movie.
I think it gets swept under the rug a lot, man, and
It does.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know it's come up in conversation a couple times, but yeah, his character I think is really underrated, especially when we have all these movies, and we could probably do an over under or amount on like vigilante movies alone. With we have all these guys like the Equalizer or like Liam Neeson from Taken or all these characters that are very across the same vein. I mean, Viggo Mortensen's character could have easily had more movies based on his history. But I think that movie just kind of went unnoticed, and he's underrated. That character is underrated in my opinion.
Yeah,
That's a great pick.
that is a good pick.
That's a good pick.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one.
good one.
Well, this has been Cult Fiction. Thanks for tuning in. This is our second episode again on Black Friday. If you're watching this in the future at some point, welcome from the past. Keep listening though. We're gonna have one of these hopefully once a week, and we're gonna be going over stuff in pop cultures, whether it be comics or trailers or movies that are out or TV series that are out. Sometimes books, toys, video games, whatever it is. We're gonna try to touch on something every week. So check us out. Cult Fiction once again. Jubal, Eric, Alex. My name is Bueller. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Have a great day.